Well, this ought to be interesting. Touhou Kobuto Burst Battle V. This is a Touhou game I can play on my TV. You know, I own a Switch, but I don't want to neglect it, so I've got to feed some games, and neglect other games in the process. But there's one game series in particular that I've always wanted to play on my Switch, and that's Touhou. The only problem is that Touhou games are mostly PC games, and as you'd guess, I suck at them. However, that doesn't mean that there aren't any Touhou games for consoles. Case in point. For simplicity's sake, I'll just refer to it as Touhou Burst Battle. The game was made by Cube Type, who've only produced 2 other Touhou games. And that's all they really did, apparently. Touhou Burst Battle is a fighting arena game that was released for the PlayStation 4, PlayStation Vita, and on the Nintendo Switch. This was the first Touhou game I ever bought for my Switch, and I gotta say, it ain't the best. First off are the controls. I think you're old enough to read, right? Now let's get into gameplay. Your main attacks are mostly Damaku, but if you get close enough, you can land some melee attacks. If you wait long enough, you'll fill up the spell card gauge that lets you use what do you think? It's pretty much a charged up special attack that can either kill your opponent, remove a large chunk of her HP, or miss if she steps aside from it. But what about combos? Well, either because I don't know how to, or because I just suck at it, there's barely any difference when I use a quote-unquote combo. Now, if you're used to playing fast-paced fighting games, then this ain't for you. Moving around is sluggish, which is not a good thing when you're constantly dodging projectiles. There is a dash button, however, but it's basically a stamina bar and it's really uncontrollable when you use it. You can also fly while jumping in midair, but because of the stamina bar, you won't be up there for long. Now let's talk about the characters themselves. Now something to note here, each character is voice acted, but I couldn't find the voice actresses for each one. Plus, it's kinda hard to hear them over the music blasting in the background. This was at default settings. As for the voice acting itself, it's all in Japanese, but it's okay for the most part, except for one character we'll get into later. When you select a character, they'll say a line in Japanese, but there aren't any subtitles for what they're saying, except for the game over screen. I feel sorry for anyone who can't read English. There are 9 characters to choose from, which is a pretty decent amount. You've got Reimu, Marissa, Rumia, Cirno, Meiling, Patchley, Zakia, Rumilia, and Flandre. Reimu's a bit basic for me. Nothing too much to say about her. Marissa, on the other hand, is a powerhouse. While getting gameplay for Reimu, I kept losing to her in 2 separate games. All you need to know about her is to just spam her Master Spark. Rumia's pretty good. Her attacks cover a good area of the stage. She's not bad. There are people who say that Cirno's the strongest. Those same people are still living like it's 2009. Yeah, Cirno's pretty weak. One strategy I used is to create ice barriers to shield myself. With Cirno, all you gotta do with her is cheese it with the ice barriers. All of her other attacks do practically nothing unless your opponent is standing still. Meiling is a bit faster than the other characters, from what I can tell. However, she doesn't have that many projectiles to use. Her other attacks only shoot out in straight lines, and you have to time your shots just right. Your best bet is circling around your opponent and attacking them from there. Patchley's the equivalent of a turret, if that turret was made out of glass. But she is fun to play as, though. Her attacks can surround your opponent with Damaku, but either because of her getting hit, or the character I choose to face her health goes down pretty quickly. Zakia is just okay. She isn't the best, but she isn't the worst. It does feel pretty satisfying chucking knives at your opponent. Just a little side note, you can't exactly manipulate time as her. Well, kinda. You can somewhat pause time, but it's only for a move that I don't even know how I executed. Rumilia is slow. And I mean slow. Out of all of these characters, she is by far the slowest. She just wants to take her sweet time on things, even if it'll kill her. Talk about charisma, am I right, guys?
Shut the fuck up.
My advice is to try and dodge attacks if you can. I do not recommend playing as her. Fortunately, Flandre is a tad bit better than her sister. She's much more fun to play as, but her attacks seem a bit standard. Now, remember how I mentioned the voice acting for the characters was okay except for one of them? Well, I may not hold any ill will towards this individual, whoever voiced Flandre made my ears bleed. This roster is all well and good, but did you notice anything odd about it? These were all characters from Embodiment of Scarlet Devil. Like, I don't know if you know this or not, but Touhou has a ton of characters. There were over 100 characters in the series at the time of this game's release. Why did they limit the character roster from just one game? Now, you would think that if they included DLC, they would have added more characters, right?
Not really.
For DLC, you can either get Yomu, or Koshi, or both. That's it. Now, these are the only characters that come outside of embodiment of Scarlet Devil, Yomu being from Perfect Cherry Blossom, and Koshi being from Subterranean Aminism. Yomu is about as fast, if not faster than Mei. Thanks to her speed, you can spam and dodge attacks faster. Plus, you can dash closer to get some melee attacks in too. Koshi, on the other hand, is a bit basic. There really isn't that much to say about her. She's fine, I guess? Oh, of course, let's not forget the alternate skins of characters in the game that are based off of other characters from the series. You've got Reimu as Sine, Marissa Semireiko, Rumi as Kokuma, Cirno as Dayase, Meiling as Yoshika, Patchouli as Sagame, Saki as Yuka, Vermilia as Satori, Flandre as Monoriko, Yomu as Momoji, and Koshi as Iku. Unfortunately, you can't change into these alternate costumes on the character select screen. You can only see them during mirror matches, which kinda sucks. Also, why couldn't they have given Reimu and Marissa their PC98 color schemes? Or gave Sakia Yumiko's color scheme? That would have worked great. All in all, in my opinion, this is not a good selection of characters. In fact, it's abysmal. Basing a majority of your roster from a series with an abundance of characters and narrowing it down to one game in the franchise is a terrible idea. That's like if Smash Bros., a game series that's whole gimmick is using characters from other franchises, only use characters from Mario. There was another Touhou game released previously by the same company called Touhou Genso Rando Bullet Ballet. That game had a more broader selection of characters, using ones from multiple games within the franchise. In fact, the models they used from that game were reused in Burst Battle. So let me ask you this. Why couldn't they just reuse the other character models from that game and use them in Burst Battle? The art style is pretty much the same. You don't need to change anything. In fact, I could think of other characters they could have added. They could have added Alice, Raisin, Moku, Aya, Sine, freaking Yukari for the heck of it. I don't freaking know. This was a missed opportunity, and it really ticks me off. Alright, well, how's the music? One of Touhou's staples. Well, it's not too bad. Each song is a remix of a pre-existing theme, and while it's not the greatest compared to many of the numerous remixes I've heard other artists do, it's okay. There are a total of 17 tracks in the game, but here's a little tidbit. There are 5 characters that have 2 different versions of their respective theme, labeled A and B, like Tetris. They are Cirno, Meiling, Patchouli, Sakia, and Vermilia. Here's a comparison between the 2 versions of Luna Clock Luna Dial. Now, while the music is alright, this is another reason why they could have used more characters. Not only are there a ton of characters in Touhou, but there are also a ton, and I do mean a ton of music tracks in Touhou. Remixing Touhou music is commonplace. If a Touhou song exists, there's probably a baker's dozen of remixes to follow. Making 2 tracks of one theme is a good idea, but only doing so for 5 characters is pretty dumb. Why not create a pair of themes for each respectable character? Not only that, but using tracks from only one game isn't a good idea either. You're still limiting yourself to just one game. Okay, then what about the stages? There are a total of 5 stages: Misty Lake, Scarlet Devil Mansion Gate, Great Library, Clock Tower, and the Scarlet Devil Mansion. There are also 2 variants of Misty Lake, Scarlet Devil Mansion Gate, and Clock Tower, one with and without blockades. Yeah, these are pretty bland. There isn't a lot going on within these stages. No background characters, no hazards, no items, no special boosts, nothing. they all end up feeling pretty lifeless. Heck, they didn't even bother to add in an extra stage for DLC. Let's talk about the story mode. Every Touhou game, to my knowledge, follows a certain storyline revolving around an incident, something that usually causes unrest or spells trouble for Gensokyo. While each incident is the same, the circumstances for each character solving it is different. Now, I won't be going into each character's story, as they all follow a similar storyline. I'm just giving you the overall premise. That, and you can find them all on YouTube. I know. I'm pretty freaking lazy. Now, whoever's the final boss of the game is usually the one behind the incident. In this case here, the incident in question revolves around Rumelia creating a Yukari Reimu, because she had nobody to play with. Now, what is a Yukari? A Yukari is basically a disembodied head of a given Touhou character that shouts out, "Take it easy," in Japanese text-to-speech. And this thing is hard to beat. It uses a combination of all the other characters' moves. Depending on the character you use, it should take only a few tries to beat it. Now, there's something I should point out about this thing. This is essentially a meme character. The Yukari is an ancient meme from 2007. This game was released in 2017, 10 years after the meme was originally created. Now, granted, the meme within the Touhou community isn't dead, as of me recording this video, but using a meme as a basis for a character is never a good idea. It makes the game feel very dated. This reminds me of those old mobile games that use Nyan Cat and troll faces. Yes, I do deserve a veteran's discount, how can you tell? Finally, let's talk about the multiplayer. Oh yeah, that's right, it doesn't exist because nobody else has this game. Now, do I recommend you buy this game? Well, not really. There are physical copies of the game available, but I suggest you don't buy them as they're not worth the money. Unless, of course, you're into collecting physical media. For a physical copy for the PS4, I've seen listings for a little over $10 on eBay. For a PS4 download, it's $19.99. On the other hand, a physical copy of the Switch version goes for roughly $18 to $20. And for download, it goes for $19.99. But at that point, I suggest you save your money for something else. It isn't worth the price. Or you could spend it on something else, like Luna Nights, a much better Touhou game that's way cheaper and is a lot more fun to play. Or you could wait for it to go on sale for $2.99. I'm not kidding. As for my final thoughts on the game, I really don't think this game was horrible. It's obviously still playable, but it can get very boring. My main problem with the game is the overall lack of content. Touhou is a game series that has spanned for decades, and within those years, a ton of games were released. In fact, at the time of this game's release, Touhou was already at its 15th game, with 2 more releasing the same year, Antinominy of Common Flowers and Hidden Star in 4 seasons. At that point, there were over hundreds of characters in the series, and there were almost as many locations they could have used. Now granted, since this game is based off of Embodiment of Scarlet Devil and is considered to be the most popular game within the franchise, I can see why they added the characters from that game. But if I wanted to play a game based off of Embodiment of Scarlet Devil, I would have played Azure Reflections, which is literally just a fan-made sequel to the game. If I wanted to play a fighting game with multiple characters from the franchise, I better see characters from all over the series. Of course, I don't know if adding more characters and stages would make the game any better, but at least it would have had some level of variety. Heck, because of how little characters there are in the game, you can finish it in less than a day. Now, that could be me being too harsh and greedy on it. I don't really know what the development was behind this game, which could explain why it is the way it is. I kinda had my hopes up when I first got this game, but in the end, I was left with wanting more. And that's all I really gotta say about it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video, whenever that'll be.